You've heard that Florida State and Clemson might bounce from the ACC by July 1st. That's not going to happen, and here's what it does to our conference. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. That is Nathan Brown of Big 12 Mafia, or as we know him around these parts, Mafia. Today, we're hitting Clemson and Florida State, staying in the ACC, at least for now. Also, here's why Kansas will not go to the SEC. And is the Big 12 getting poached? We've heard Utah, TCU, Kansas, all with rumors tied to other major conferences. How valid are those? Nathan, as we get started here, Florida State and Clemson, it's become much more clear. These two schools down the road want to leave the ACC. And in my opinion, that will be the domino that keeps ESPN off the table for that conference past 2027. However, it seems like right now, there's no reason for either of them to jump ship until everything is settled in court.
That's exactly right. All it does is open them up to other litigation. There's other things that you're playing poker. You don't want to lay down your whole hand and expose everything you're doing. You want to keep those things close to your vest. So they're going to wait. I said this on our Friday show last week. I don't personally think that either school is in a rush to do anything. I think both of them have enough funding that they're going to be successful on the back end. And look, they can always write a check if say they lose every single legal challenge and nothing goes their way. What have they lost? A little bit of time, some legal fees that are going to be covered by boosters. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, these two schools have bigger dreams. They need to be somewhere else. And even if they wrote a check, and this is crazy, but let's say they wrote a check for $570 million over the period of the term of the ACC contract, the difference between that and the two contracts that the Big Ten or the SEC are going to be dealing with, you're looking at $2 billion. So even at that, it's still a 1 to 3, right? There's all they do is lose a little bit of time. Their fans get a little anxious, but they know they've got a place to land.
Do you think that where USC and UCLA were and the way that they withdrew from the Pac-12 is almost a red flag that went up to say, hey, Florida State, Clemson, don't do it this way. Touch the bases, check the boxes first.
Well, I mean, I don't know about that because UCLA and USC got out almost scot-free.
Yeah,
right?
No kidding.
Contract was over. And so for them, it was like they didn't really lose anything. Yeah. The ones that you really have to look big picture are Washington, Oregon, what happened with them, or like a Utah or an ASU or an Arizona that, got kind of shafted with the conference blowing up. Yeah. I don't think Florida State and Clemson have really anything to lose at this point. Their fans want change. They have boosters that are motivated to write checks to get things to happen. They've got all kinds of infrastructure projects going on their campus. So what's really driving anything? There's no big push to have them do any of the work before the legal filings are done. And right now, I still think the judges are sort of leaning, we'll see what happens with the Supreme Court I think it's in 2 weeks in Florida, see if that motion to stay is kept or if they get to move on. And then it'll go back to whatever it is in North Carolina court. Then it'll be back to Leon County in Florida. And this will go a while. I think really the only question is when, the timing. Mm-hmm. Can ESPN and the ACC, can they afford to wait? Some people say yes, some people say don't. I think it hurts them.
That is the timeline. The timeline is what everybody's wrapped up in. And I want to play a bit of a devil's advocate here. One of the cases that I've seen brought up recently is if Florida State, if Clemson officially say, hey, our intent, because there's that if and when in the legal documents, Florida State saying if and when we leave, but if it becomes when we leave, then the fan base is behind it. Donations start piling in, whatever we can do, this mass effort, because folks are so fed up, especially after the recent college football playoff conundrum, to get Florida State gone. Is there an added plus there? Is there a reason to expedite the process there? Because now you've rallied the troops in essence.
If there is, I'm not seeing it. I mean, I've watched all these Florida State contributors. A lot of them are my friends now at this point. And everything I'm hearing from them is they're not seeing a rush. So if they don't feel urgent, if they don't feel like it absolutely has to be done tomorrow, then why, as an outsider, a third party, would I look at that and see it's any different? And look, at the end of the day, we're talking billions and billions of dollars of revenue, the long game, right? And Florida State and Clemson want to be relevant. And that, to me, that's my biggest word that I use over and over again. It was obvious that the ACC and even the Big 12, the relevancy bar is extremely low right now. And the relevancy is now sitting at the Big 10 and the SEC. If you're a school that's right there on the edge and all you need is a little shove over the top by boosters and by people to give you the financing to last to that next step, I don't think it's going to. That's a couple phone calls in my opinion.
Along with this move, there have been the murmurs of Florida State, Clemson to the Big Ten and the SEC. It seems as though those are the likely landing spots, but those conversations can't happen yet. The grant of rights is still in place as of today, and that's fraud. I mean, if we've got these underneath the table, Florida State calling the Big Ten and trying to get a scope of where they'll go and what it'll look like, that goes against the contract they have themselves under, at least right now. In the same vein for the Big 12. There's no way to talk to Louisville right now. There's no way to gauge what Pitt is feeling, correct?
Right. No, there isn't. I mean, obviously, third-party people, that's who they use for USC, UCLA. Third-party people is who they use for Oregon, Washington, because they are tied into these grander rights, and it's called tampering. And it's just like any other legal contract. You sign a legal contract to go and work for ESPN, go work for the Bananas. To do that, that meant you gave up certain rights. There's certain things you had to trade for a salary and for access. The exact same thing goes in these places. These schools have tentacles all throughout the United States. They have boosters all across the country that can write big checks. And there's nothing to stop a big-time booster flying from Tallahassee into Chicago to the Big Ten offices and having a conversation with a guy at lunch. As long as you can't prove there's any sort of a documentation or trail, email or something like that this person went and met with this person at the conference, it's almost impossible to prove.
And that is why the speculation will continue forever and ever, because of the middlemen that exist across college sports that have always existed. And Nathan, you didn't sign a contract to be on the show today, but I'm certainly happy that you are here. And coming up, let's get into Kansas to the SEC. I don't think it's going to happen. Let's see what Nathan thinks. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, a couple of weeks ago, those horses were running around the track, and I thought, I would like to put a bit of my money on the horses running around the track, and I bet on a guy named Mystic Dan. Why? Because his name was really cool, and I thought it was cool they spelled Mystic with a K. And guess what? That $20 turned into $300 thanks to FanDuel. It's also winner-take-all time in the NBA and NHL with the playoffs, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. You get $150 as a new customer to spend on spreads, money lines, and player props with any winning $5 bet. Put $5 on Cole Reagans to hit the over in strikeouts. Who is that and what does that mean? I don't know, but I did it and it won. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. You get a $5 bet that hits, gives you $150 in bonus bets. That is FanDuel.com/locked on. Nathan Brown of Big 12 Mafia. Greg Pflugar mentioned almost in passing about Kansas going to the SEC. Now, Pflugar is the same guy that was very early on USC moving to the Big 10. The same guy who told us Colorado was coming back to the Big 12. He has got sources across the country. He did not guarantee that Kansas will move to the Southeastern Conference, but it's at least on the table. I don't think that's going to happen. What say you?
Well, I'm going to go back a little bit in time. So we've been covering college football for the last year on my channels, right? Big 12 Mafia and College Football Mafia Network. We're covering all this stuff. And Kansas has come up in conversations similar like Texas A&M to the Big Ten type of conversations. If you think about it logistically, you have these regions that these big two conferences are cut up in, and there are natural affiliations that could bring in a team like that. So imagine Missouri now has a Kansas across the border. It's very easy to do those cross-border battles and to promote and bring things in. The other part of it is we now find out that basketball is going to be a big moneymaker moving forward, and Sankey's no dummy. So anytime they can bring in additional national monies based on participation of any school, let alone Kansas, the number one basketball brand in all of college basketball, why wouldn't you do it? The only question is going to be, is there enough money in the kitty to pay for it? I don't think there is. For Kansas to go in, it would really have to be maybe at a third of a share, maybe a half of a share. Now, for Kansas, you'd take that decision in a heartbeat because
it's about as much as they're getting in the Big 12,
Right. And then the payoff changes in 5 or 6 years, and now all of a sudden you're getting $100 million a year.
Right.
So from Kansas standpoint, they would do that in a heartbeat. The only question is there enough revenue? Is there enough justification from a money perspective to prove that Kansas, or for that matter, any other school in the Big 12, moving to a Big 10 or the SEC has the value? It brings the eyeballs, and there aren't a lot of brands that will do it. There's not a lot in the Big 12 or the ACC outside of Miami. You have Florida State and Clemson. If you look at the numbers, Louisville is the only other one that's close. So Kansas to go there, of course they could. If they want to have them in there, the SEC will write a check and bring them in. But is it imminent? I don't think Greg said it was imminent. I think Greg said that he's hearing that people are talking to people at Kansas, not, again, boosters, they can't tamper, but they're having these conversations. Is it logical? Sure. You can see that in the coming years, but in the next 2-3 years, I just don't think the money's there.
Nathan, it almost goes against everything that I've preached for the last year about how football pushes the needle and is the moneymaker. It's still, that's still true. That quote is still true. Yep. What changed? Why basketball? Why now? Why is that a hot commodity? Especially as we saw the ACC try to become that basketball conference and fall flat on its face.
Well, let's talk about the big thing, the elephant in the room that nobody wants to put a dollar amount on, and that's brand value. Look, Oregon by themselves without Nike, the brand is... They're like I don't even want to throw a school. I mean,
Washington State.
They're not any better than Oregon State is without Nike.
Yep.
And now that endowment is built, Phil Knight put the money in, has built that athletic endowment. Now Oregon will never be short of money for athletics, but that is what we're looking at, is brand value. Right now, the brands that you have in the ACC that could carry the day, that would be Miami, Clemson, and Florida State. And probably you could put North Carolina in there. Louisville is a great fit. But Kansas itself, it's that brand. You could put Kansas, the little Jayhawk, you put the KU on a hat, everybody knows what it is. Just like everybody knows the Duke one, everybody knows North Carolina, and that has a lot of value. Bob Thompson in his what is it, Fabulous Five, if you want to call them that, all rules of realignment, brand is number 1 or 2 on every time he's done a list. So if Bob Thompson says it, I believe it.
As Kansas, if football is not there, and I've made the case a couple of times that there are schools that are looking to get in the SEC, that it might be the end of your football program. I mean, that's a Kansas going to the SEC going 4-8. You're asking to go 4-8 to make a lot more money. Betting on yourself doesn't always work here. We've seen that with a couple of expansion partners. Even Texas A&M thought, look, we can go to the SEC and compete in football. And they haven't done it yet, and their resources are obviously tenfold above what Kansas has on the gridiron. Would that athletic department in Lawrence be making an incorrect move by betting on itself and moving to the SEC, especially when football is the long-term plan?
What is your long-term goal if you're running a business? You have to set a marker, right?
I want to make money. You want
money, or do you want to be competitive? Because except for the NFL, no other league in the world has the competitive balance like the NFL does, and college football certainly does not.
Right.
So at the organizational level at KU, are they okay going 4-8, maybe a good year 7-5, but they're cashing a check for $100 million? The boosters, they have some choice in that, but that's an academic discussion. That's a discussion you have to have with your chancellor and your board of trustees and board of governors. Every school has to answer that differently. Unfortunately, everybody that's in the Big 12 and the SEC is set. They got their golden ticket, and at least for now, that's not being pulled anytime soon. Maybe in the future that changes. I'm not seeing it on a horizon anywhere. But Kansas, they could look at it and say, look, we're building a stadium. We're doing what we can to improve our facilities. But is Kansas ever going to be a juggernaut in football in the SEC or the Big Ten? I don't think so.
Probably not.
That's where it comes down to. By the way, when the news about Kansas came out from Greg, there was this thought that, wow, there would be this hue and cry. Everybody would be complaining, oh, no, another school is leaving the Big 12 to go to a big conference to play football. You didn't hear that. In fact, KSU didn't really say anything about it. It's kind of like, oh, okay. Well, whatever. I mean, is it a basketball brand? Yes, but you've already said it. Football drives realignment. So losing Kansas in the Big 12, I'm sure they're thinking, Oregon State.
Yeah.
Louisville,
Washington State, Louisville.
If they could bring him in. I don't think that's an even trade. In fact, Louisville brand for brand is actually worth more than Kansas. Not the brand value, but the football and basketball programs.
Yeah, from a revenue standpoint, especially even the United States government, the EADA numbers show that Louisville's far ahead of most Big 12 schools and even a couple of ACC schools, ACC juggernauts over the last 2 decades. Nathan, I agree. It was a collective scoff when there was like, oh, Kansas SEC, you're a Kansas State fans like, oh, whatever. And then Missouri fans were the ones that were pushing back on it so much because they would hate to see who they consider little brother to get into the conference.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Basketball wise, for sure. Nathan, it brings up the question to me, does this murmur mean that Brett Yormark will at some point have to play the defensive to keep teams in the league again? Let's go there next on Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by the reason that I'm a fierce competitor, and that is Monopoly Go. I played the traditional Monopoly. I still play the traditional Monopoly, but now I can do it on the go in my car, not while I'm driving, via the app from the App Store or Google Play. Game on. We got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You already talked about that yesterday, but you can team up with friends right now for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, like unique stickers you can trade with friends to compete for albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with as well. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day. Constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure and a robot pachinko machine. There's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win, rent, or frenzies. There's something always to discover at Monopoly Go. Set off the bench. Go download it now for free, actually, on Google Play and the App Store. Game on. Monopoly Go. Nathan Brown of Big 12 Mafia. Is Brett Yormark on the defensive again at some point? If what many have murmured is going to happen, this Pangea of college football where teams just hodgepodge into 2 major conferences, does Yormark have to start defending a Kansas who's been rumored to the SEC? Recently, a USA Today outlet posted about Utah and TCU being expansion candidates for the Big Ten. When do you have to hug around and say, look, everybody stay close?
It goes back to that big numbers game. I don't think there's money there to expand past 20 schools, which would leave TCU.
I don't mean to. I don't.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll pause you here. Will there ever be? We keep talking about how right now, right? Will there ever be?
I was just going to say that. So that's okay.
Minds.
So the idea that these billion-dollar media deals will continue to happen and happen and happen, we might possibly over the next 30 years have seen the last billion-dollar deal with the Big Ten. All the money is leaving entertainment. It's running for cover in sports entertainment. It's amazing. ESPN continues to lose. They're the grand poobah of all college football, right? They continue to lose subs. So money is running away from sports, even though college football is like at the top with the NFL. So it's like you're looking at and you're bipolar. You see, yes, it's never been more popular, but there's not enough money to sustain. So in my opinion, no, I don't think so. Utah, TCU, you can throw anybody on that list. Could they be an eventually candidate when they go to 48 schools? Of course. There's no school in the Big 12 that wouldn't be on that 48 team list. You would basically be vetted, and then maybe they bring you in if the money's ever there. I don't think the money's going to be there for quite a while. Look at all the money that's going out the door now. You got the House versus NCAA, $2.8 billion. That's all going to have to be put on the backs of the schools. That money isn't just going to come out of nowhere. So where do they get that on an annual basis? Then you have all the lawsuits that have to do with the player representation and our players' employees. And if they are, how is NIL administered? And all these things. we're a long way away from there being a big money grab and team grab in these leagues. I think the Big Ten goes to 20. I think the SEC at the very most ever goes to 20. I don't even think they ever get past that. And it's possible they only go with 2, depending on what happens at North Carolina and North Carolina State. So, no, I don't. I mean, it's great for those fans. I mean, I would love to hear in a sentence by some creator that BYU's imminent to the SEC, right? But it just because it makes me feel good for about 5 minutes, if anybody has really been paying attention, there's not enough money to support these teams moving over.
There's an article from Forbes in 2022 that says, why do sports rights continue to go up while viewership goes down? The World Series is down 30%. The NBA Finals are down 30%. People are watching sports less. The only thing that seems to be up is the Super Bowl, the greatest social event that the United States puts on every single year. That being said, Bill Connolly of ESPN still went on Sports Fan 1080 this week. There was a great piece on Heartland College Sports about it and said, I think the Big 12 is bold enough to expand to 32. I said that's impossible. No. What do you say?
No, look, if you have the ability to, you go into the schoolyard and you can pick the best 10 guys to be on your war ball team, right? Are you going to pick the 5 guys that they're got the best arms, they're baseball players, and then you're going to moderate and you're going to pick the kids that aren't the most athletic, that like spending their time at home reading or playing video games? No, you're not going to do that. You're going to pick the 10 best athletes to be on your team. It's not what is the word? I can't even think of the word. It's not like you have to bring everybody up just because you're required to. Chance that the Big 12 goes past 20 is very, very small. If they go to even 24, that still leaves out all those other schools that might be coming in. I think the 32 idea was because they want to keep the ACC together with the Big 12. That merger idea is ridiculous because you want Baylor to make more money. You don't want Baylor to take less money to add more schools that actually are less dedicated to the sports you care about, because all it does is weaken what you look like. Your guilt is by association now. And we know the schools. I don't need to call them out. The ones in the ACC that they're probably not going to get an invite, at least at this iteration right now.
I'll call them out. You're Wake Forest. If you're Wake Forest, you probably aren't in a great spot as it sits. Right. And I'll actually put a pause in my questioning here to talk about that. The idea of a Big 12 ACC merger, the reason that I think there is truly no way at the very base level why there's no way it happens is Brett Yormark believes he has leverage right now. Jim Phillips has the opposite. The one of them is on the offensive and the other is on his toes. And that's the guy who's being sued by the attorney general in Florida, Clemson and Florida State. Do you think the opportunity for a merger is nigh because Yormark has the upper hand and within 2 years could say, oh, I want you, and you, instead of taking all of the ACC properties? Yes,
that's it. It's 100%. Easiest way to put it. Yep.
Oh, sweet. I didn't know you would agree with me like that.
Well, I mean, when you boil it down, I mean, you think about it, why would you take on schools that lower your value? Right. There's no reason to bring in any schools that don't at least give you 31.7. I can't think of it. Nobody's been able to give me one article or point of fact that says the Big 12 by expanding to 32 actually gets more valuable. In my opinion, which isn't uneducated, it actually goes down in value if you bring in any schools past 20. I think they go to 20 and should stop. I don't even think they should go any farther than that.
Well, and this was supposed to be a conversation about the Big 12 getting poached. Now we've got the Big 12 poaching up to 32. ESPN looks at that, Fox looks at that and says, hey, wait a second, 16 of these teams are valuable. 14 of these teams are valuable. You've got 18 dead weight members that we are not making money off of. And that's what you're seeing in the ACC at the bottom half of the ACC. And the reason that I, again, don't think that ESPN holds on, especially at a lucrative price past 2027. Before we get out of here, Nathan, with that, let's thesis, bow on it. Big 12 teams are secure for now, at least when it comes to the SEC and the Big 10 calling to try to grab schools out of this conference.
Yeah, unless somebody can show me some sort of a metric out there that it says that hidden in a away room somewhere under lock and key, that all of a sudden TCU is now worth $70 million instead of $30 million.
Yeah. Nathan, where can folks find your work and honestly your network's work?
Right. So at Big 12 Mafia, you see me there, my tag underneath my picture right now. You can find me on Twitter. College Football Mafia Network. Just put that into YouTube. And we have several shows now. We're slowly growing. We're nothing like Drake is with Locked On Big 12. But yeah, we're doing okay. We're still growing. And just College Football Mafia or Big 12 Mafia on YouTube, you'll find us out.
It is. I had a fraternity brother tell me about 8 months ago, the first time he came on Locked On Big 12, he said, I don't know that Mafia guy's name, but the fact you call him Mafia was the coolest thing ever. So for the rest of the time, your moniker on the show, it's branding thing. We talk about brand value and how you know, your brand. And so it's Big 12 Mafia all the way. And I tell you, for the listeners of Locked On Big 12, it is the most informational place you can get a wide array of expansion news, realignment news, and even news about where the court system is taking college football and college athletics on the whole as it sits. I don't think anybody does it with deeper value than Big 12 Mafia and the family of networks. And so check out Nathan's stuff at B12 Mafia on Twitter. This has been and always will be. Thanks for making this your first listen every single day. Locked On. Come back tomorrow. We are talking even more from the courts. And thanks again for making your first listen every single day. Dose grande.